the Book Fair, children's literature for grown-ups. This week, Moms for Liberty loses big on school board elections in Florida. Iowa librarians are helping reach out to communities in the digital age. And a new court decision in Iowa allows for schools to enforce book bans. As well as an interview with Amari and the Despicable Wonders author B.B. Alston. Let us begin with the bad news. This comes from the Des Moines Register. Iowa can now enforce book ban law after appeals court overturns injunction. Appeals court judges on Friday overturned a temporary block on Iowa's book ban law, allowing the state to enforce restrictions on which books schools can have on library shelves. Senate File 496, a sweeping education law passed in 2023, has been tangled up in court since last fall. The law bans books that depict or describe sex acts from school except for religious and health texts. It also prohibits instruction or curriculum about gender identity and sexual orientation through the 6th grade, which some schools have interpreted to include banning books with those themes. The Des Moines Register has documented 3,400 books pulled from schools under Senate File 496, which also prompted concerns from advocates about the effect on LGBTQ+ students. Several groups, including authors whose books were banned, major book publishers, the statewide teachers union, and families with LGBTQ students, have sued the state in an attempt to overturn the law. U.S. District Court Judge Stephen Locker, a President Joe Biden appointee in December, placed a preliminary injunction on the law's book ban and its restriction on the instruction of gender and sexuality while the lawsuits continue. He wrote that File 496 is too vague and presents constitutional concerns under the First and 14th Amendments. Locker also wrote that the restrictions on instructions about gender identity and sexual orientation were written so broadly that they would apparently apply to boys and girls' bathrooms, a teacher going by Mr. or Mrs., or a math problem where a girl is referred to as she. The state of Iowa appealed the injunction. A panel of 3 appeals judges overturned the injunction on Friday and sent the case back to district court for further proceedings. Judge Ralph Erickson, who was appointed by former President Donald Trump, wrote in the opinion that the district court's analysis was flawed. Quote, "Given the pedagogical mission and the policy-making authority possessed by Iowa, it is important in conducting a review and analysis to bear in mind that Iowa is not required to tolerate speech that undermines or is inconsistent with its mission of educating Iowa children," the appeals court says. Unfortunately, this does mean that the state can continue with its book banning law. If you'd like to read further, I will include the link to the paper in the podcast description. There are also several helpful links in that article to read further on this situation. Next up, continuing with Iowa from iowapublicradio.org, how Iowa libraries serve communities in the digital age. Librarians across Iowa provide materials in all types of formats, even building community on social media platforms. But meeting their community's varying needs can translate to hefty price tags, straining library budgets. If you've ever rented an audio or ebook from your local library, you may have waited in a long digital line for a copy or wondered why there aren't more digital editions available. Providing digital options to readers comes at a steep cost to libraries. Librarians must balance trying to provide a full range of services without breaking the budget. In today's political and economic environment, that can be a challenge. Providing digital copies of books to patrons can be difficult with varying agreements and vendor and patron expectations. Ann Mangano, Collections Services and Coordinator at the Iowa City Public Library, said the licensing agreements for libraries to provide ebooks or audiobooks on the popular library app Libby are expensive. Quote, "You may be able to get that copy on Amazon or Apple for $12 or $20. We're paying $65. We're paying $85 for audiobooks that can be $125 a copy. And we get those copies sometimes for 1 year, sometimes for 2, sometimes for 24 checkouts, and then we have to repurchase it." Another popular library app, Hoopla, doesn't have a wait time like Libby because the library doesn't curate the material's availability by purchasing the copies. In that business model, anytime a patron checks out a title, the library is charged. Mangano said an individual checkout could cost the library from 99 cents to $3.99, which adds up at the end of the month in the library's bill and can be hard to manage. Last month, the Iowa City Public Library removed ebooks and audiobooks from Hoopla that cost more than $1.99, which can be a difficult decision for library staff. Quote, "We want people to use the library however they want to," said Ellsworth Carmen, library director at the Iowa City Public Library. Quote, "So when we talk about the burden of cost, it's never to dissuade users. We want you to use what's comfortable and what works well. But I think being realistic and honest about that is also part of our job as a city department, to make sure that these things are known and the challenges are known." Mangano also noted that patrons should know that when they get a notification from Hoopla encouraging them to check out more books before the end of the month, that message is coming from a corporation, not the library. In addition to providing reading materials digitally, librarians are using virtual tools to reach out to their patrons, especially TikTok. Book Talk, a sub-community in the app, is all about sharing book recommendations, gushing over authors, and celebrating a culture of reading. Quote, "We wanted to figure out a way where we could make videos to be part of the conversation," said Kelly Marble, digital marketing specialist at the Des Moines Public Library. Quote, "We didn't think we would be doing dances or anything like that on TikTok, but seeing people talk about books, we were like, we have teams of librarians who are experts at recommending books. And how can we get their recommendations in front of people?" If you would like to read further about the impact of libraries in the digital age, I will, of course, include a link to this article in the podcast description. Closing out on some good news here. Results: majority of DeSantis-backed candidates lose school board races in Tampa Bay area. Tampa, Florida, WFLA. Many candidates backed by Florida Governor Ron DeSantis lost their race for spots on school boards across the Tampa Bay area on Tuesday. In a continued effort to reshape Florida's education system, Governor Ron DeSantis threw his weight behind 23 county school board candidates across the state, targeting 14 counties, including both Hillsborough and Pinellas. Activists had hoped that 3 challengers endorsed by the local chapter of Moms for Liberty would win a conservative majority in Pinellas County, home to St. Petersburg on Florida's Gulf Coast. Florida's Democratic Party, led by Nikki Fried, threw its support behind 11 candidates as part of its Take Back Local program, saying the party is, quote, "not going to let Ron DeSantis and his allies take over our school boards with far-right Moms for Liberty candidates." So far, a majority of DeSantis' candidates had lost their race for school board seats in the Tampa Bay area. Layla Collins, backed by DeSantis, lost to Nadia Combs in Hillsborough's District 1, while Miosha Powell lost to Jessica Vaughn in District 3. Collins and Powell were backed by DeSantis, while Combs and Vaughn were backed by Florida Democrats under their Take Back Local programs. In Pinellas County, an unofficial result shows current school board chair Laura Hine and incumbent member Eileen Long have held on to their seats after arguing that a political shift on the board would create turmoil in the district and distract from the mission of student achievement. In a third race for an open seat on the Pinellas board, candidates Stacey Gare and Katie Blacksburg appeared to be headed for a runoff after no one in the three-way contest cleared 50% of the vote. With 100% of precincts reporting, Hine, the board chair, carried 69% of the vote over DeSantis-backed challenger Danielle Merloff's 30%, according to preliminary results. Incumbent member Long was brought in 54% of the vote over the 45% netted by Erica Pickard, who was endorsed by the Republican governor. In the third race for the board, Stacey Gare garnered 37% of the vote compared to Katie Blacksburg's 34%, with a third candidate, Brad DeCourte, netting 28%, according to the county's preliminary results. Gere was endorsed by DeSantis and the local chapter of Moms for Liberty, while Blacksburg has argued parental rights activists have gone too far, with some equating books with pornography and labeling teachers as groomers. She found herself on the opposing side of the local chapter of Moms for Liberty and was targeted by conservative activists online. So in short, it looks like DeSantis and Moms for Liberty are losing in the Tampa Bay area. However, there is seemingly going to be a runoff election where one Moms for Liberty candidate is in a virtual tie with an opposition. So hopefully that'll come out in the favor of the freedom to read. Again, all related materials will be in the description of the podcast episode. Before we move on with the show, I do want to mention there are a few ways that you can support the book fair if you do like what we do here at the book fair. Primarily, you can review or rate the podcast wherever you cast your pods, be that iTunes or Spotify. There are shareable links on your podcatcher of choice where you can send the podcast to friends, family, or you can just play it for any young readers in your life. I do strive to make these family-friendly episodes and provide content that people of all ages are able to enjoy. Secondly, you can follow the podcast on Facebook, on Instagram, and on Threads. Just simply look for Book Fair Pod. And lastly, you can also follow the podcast on Patreon at patreon.com/thebookfair. That is the book fair spelled F-A-I-R-E. You can follow the podcast without paying to support it, or you can throw a little money my way to help make this an even more stable, regular thing. Now, let's move on to some book recommendations. The first new release is Everything We Never Had by Randy Ribay. Ribay examines masculinity and familial trauma via 4 generations of Filipino teens' alternating perspectives in this emotionally resonant tale. In 2020 Philadelphia, Enzo Magabol's anxiety makes him feel like his head is full of murder hornets. Their buzzing gets worse when he learns his estranged grandfather will be moving in with his family during the pandemic. Banned from playing football for Denver school due to his strict father's approach to education, Chris becomes absorbed by the socio-political struggles in 1983 Philippines when he begins researching his ancestry, something his father would rather forget. Emil struggles to support himself and his mother while his absent father fights for farm workers' rights in 1965 Stockton, California. After emigrating from the Philippines to Watsonville, California in 1929, Francisco finds his dreams of a fresh start waylaid by the hard labor and racial violence he endures in his daily life. Compact storytelling, richly layered with Filipino-American culture and history, provides the backdrop for each father-son relationship as the Magabols confront personal and familial expectations in both past and present narratives. This book is recommended for ages 12 and up. The next new release this week is The Extraordinary Disappointments of Leopold Berry, Sunderworld No. 1, by Ransom Riggs, author of the Miss Peregrine books. After his mother's death 5 years ago, Leopold Berry's grief-fueled obsession with the kitschy fantasy TV show Sunderworld began inducing escapist dissociative episodes. Now 17 and perfectly average, Leopold and his best friend Emmett learn that these seeming hallucinations are glimpses into an actual magical Sunderworld that desperately seeks a powerful channeler to vanquish monsters and reverse magic shortages. Upon the duo's arrival to Sunderworld, Leopold must participate in a televised spell-casting test if he wants to become a channeler. But when he fails, he and Emmett are banished and their memories magically wiped with spells that backfire. While Leopold's memories remain intact, Emmett develops troubling neurological symptoms, prompting Leopold to defy exile and search Sunderworld for a cure. What he finds instead is a deeper mystery involving an enigmatic girl, an enchanted map, and a charmed object that only he can activate. This book is recommended for ages 14 and up. The next new release is Practical Rules for Cursed Witches by Kayla Cottingham. 17-year-old witch Delilah B. must break a deadly curse or lose her powers in this warmly rendered sapphic fantasy from Cottingham. In Keldwyn, custom dictates that a witch must complete a test of magical prowess, their calling, to come into their full powers. Taking after her famed but estranged curse breaker father, Delilah planned to use her calling to break the curse she inherited from her mother, which ensures that anyone who falls in love with a bee woman will inevitably forget her. But before Delilah can claim her task, her calling ceremony is commandeered by Kieran Pelumbra, the son of the richest family in Keldwyn, who is cursed to siphon his magic into his twin sister, with deadly consequences for both. Forced to aid Kieran's quest, Delilah sets off on a treacherous journey to find Kieran's absent twin and break the enchantments of all three before time runs out. This book is recommended for ages 12 and up. The final new release is a timely and topical one. It is called Show Up and Vote by Annie DiFranco and illustrated by Rachelle Baker. Speaking in flashback, a narrator recalls how I learned what it meant to show up and vote in this work that offers a pushing message of empowerment and collective action. Though a child is reluctant to head out to the polls on a rainy November day, their mama said, "Listen, we're on a mission that by definition no one can do for us." At the polling place, a neighbor helps voters sign in, and the presence of friends and acquaintances inspires a key observation. Looks like the whole neighborhood's got the same job to do. Musician and activist DiFranco takes a controversial approach to voter education, centering feelings of belonging, pride, and excitement, and describing voting as where it all starts, where us people have a say. Baker's stylized poster-like digital illustrations amplify the narrative's "we're in it together" vibe, visualizing a vintage polling place and its operations, including a curtained booth, as part of community care. This book is recommended for ages 3 to 6. However, it is about that time of year, there are elections coming along, and some states have deadlines of when you can register. If you are not registered, you can go to vote.org, find out when, where, and how you can register to vote in the upcoming election. And now I'd like to take you to an interview with author B.B. Alston. B.B. Alston is the author of the Supernatural Investigations series, which began in 2021 with the release of Amari and the Night Brothers. Its sequel, Amari and the Great Game, released in 2022, and out now is the third in the series, Amari and the Despicable Wonders. I would also like to point out that right before we began recording, my cat jumped up onto the desk, and he proceeded to meow multiple times throughout the recording. So you'll notice that we have the giggles in the first few minutes, and you will be able to hear the professor meowing in the background. Now, on with the interview. He's been so good for all other interviews. Hello, B.B. Alston. How are you doing today?
Pretty good. How about you?
I'm great. So, just to kick off this conversation, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself and about the Supernatural Investigations series?
Okay, so my name is B.B. Alston. I'm from Columbia, South Carolina. Not the most non-exciting place in the world, but it's home. I've written 3 books: Amari and the Night Brothers, Amari and the Great Game, and now out today is Amari and Despicable Wonders. It's about a girl who discovers there's a magical agency that handles the supernatural creatures that live among us, and it's really exciting, a lot of fun. I hope you guys like it.
I have been thoroughly enjoying it. I listened to the audiobook of the first book about a week ago in preparation for this, and I absolutely love the unique voice in which that you take an approach to this. The idea of a hidden world of supernatural beings is something that we see a lot of, but we don't see enough diverse voices when it comes to the way these stories are presented and the characters within them.
Yeah, absolutely. I think for me, when I was growing up, I remember whenever I would imagine like a fantasy world, I would kind of take myself out because I didn't remember ever seeing any characters like me in the book, or if they were in the book, they were like a side character who came for comedic relief every now and then. And so I just thought it would be cool just to have Amari be the main character and kind of show that everybody can be the hero of their own story. I thought that was a cool idea to have, so I went with it.
And I absolutely love that. And in those other kinds of books, whenever the main character discovers the magical world and their connection to it, it's usually such a life-changing event and is often one of like the presented as the greatest day of their life. However, for Amari, when she is labeled as having a magical ability and is given the title of magician, she is pulled aside by the people within this summer program and is almost interrogated like a threat. How do you feel about kind of that takeaway? What's your side of that interpretation of the events?
Yeah, I just one of the big themes for the book is the idea of otherness, and what about things that separate us, as far as like, and I thought, like, in a world that kind of predicated on magic, what would make you be an other? And I thought, well, maybe too much magic. What if that was the situation? And so there's the whole idea, the whole basis of the supernatural world is that humans can only have a certain amount of magic. We wouldn't do the right thing with it. And so here comes Amari with so much magic, and I just thought that was a really cool way to kind of mirror what she was experiencing in her everyday world, where she's kind of like the poor kid, the outcast, in her fancy private school. And I just thought that would be a cool way to kind of mirror that kind of feeling of being the other or being separate, and how do you navigate that?
And I felt that was something really powerful and kind of grounding to the story, because Amari does come from this kind of known world aspect of being an outsider, because she doesn't feel like she belongs in the upper class of the nicer school. And then she comes to a place where she feels like she belongs, but then is suddenly told, no, you actually don't. And so do you feel that Amari had to kind of carve her own path when it came to navigating the supernatural world?
Oh, absolutely. So, like you said, she shows up and she's automatically like separated from all the other kids, and so, but this is already a kid who's dealing with confidence issues and kind of like learning to find her own voice. And so, as much as the story is about myths and magic and all that kind of stuff, it's really about a young girl kind of learning to accept herself, learning to get learning to believe in herself, get self confidence. And you really kind of see over the course of the story, and even the series, that she kind of learns she finds her own footing. She develops her own code for what's wrong and what's right, and she kind of follows that. That she kind of learns to believe in herself and kind of navigates through that world for sure.
And Amari, one of the biggest anchor points for the character has got to be her brother. How important do you think that is to her character, establishing that role model, and then kind of taking it away in the beginning of the story where he's missing?
Yeah, I think. Well, I won't take too much credit for that. It's kind of a convention for middle grade books. You give them a role model, you take them away, so they have to kind of find their own footing. And so that's I can't really take too much credit for that. But I think it was important just to show that as much as I'm showing Amari kind of in her neighborhood in a certain light, that that there's also I'm sorry, I told somebody to cover right now. I'm sorry, so sorry about that. But there's also, I wanted to show that there's she does have a positive role model. That there are people from her neighborhood that do go on and do great things, and she's more than just stereotypes. I thought her brother was like a very good example of what being more than what your stereotypes are, and I thought that'd be really important.
Yes, and that was one of the things I also loved about it, was addressing and then breaking away from those stereotypes, because Amari was stereotyped from the very beginning by people in
hmm
her class.
Yeah, I think it's very important. Because I think especially for kids in that specific circumstance who kind of get the message. Because I was a kid in that circumstance, who kind of get the message that you're less than because you come from this place, or you're not as good as kids who maybe have more things than you. And so I think seeing her overcome that and be resilient and find her voice. I mean, I think that's so important for kids to see. And just to show that anybody can be the hero of their own story, and in your real life story, you can be the hero of your own story too. So no matter where you come from or how you look.
And Amari is very resilient and persistent. She's very dedicated, almost to the point of being stubborn throughout the story, isn't she?
Oh, absolutely. She's definitely headstrong, and like, once she gets the idea of something's the right thing to do, she's gonna follow that path. And I thought showing that you see that a lot with the male characters, and boy characters feel that way. I wanted to show that a girl character could have that same determination, that same fight, that same drive, and so I thought that was really important.
Yes, and there's always like this idea of a female character or a girl who is like being told that they have to control themselves or control their emotions. And so
Absolutely.
did you really come at that as a point of contention for this character where she is being told her life to quiet down, and she just reaches a point where she says that's not an option anymore?
Yeah, and that's actually a really great question. 'Cause that's why I started the story with her kind of being in trouble for shoving somebody, kind of like Lumen, like having that moment where she's kind of lost control for a moment. Because I think girls are always hammered with the message of conform, be behave, be the good, the good girl, I guess, that kind of situation. And I want to show that that she's human, that she makes mistakes, she loses her temper sometimes, but she does try to do the right thing, and she does have a moral compass that kind of guides her. And I think for girl characters, especially for young girl characters to see that, I think that's probably something you don't see a lot of or enough of at least in books these days for sure.
Yes, and so Amari losing her temper, it kind of comes from a place of doing the right thing. Do you think that kind of reflects some of the themes of social justice, particularly when it comes to protected classes? So similar to how Amari as a poor black girl, and then in the supernatural world as a magician, has that sense of standing up for what is right, as opposed to standing up against oppression. I mean, I should say.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, Amari faces that, like you said, on both sides from when she's in the real world and in the supernatural world. And being somebody who doesn't have a lot of confidence at the start of the story, that can be very hard to do. When you feel one thing is right, and then you have people, especially people positioned above you, telling you that you're not supposed to do this, or that you're not allowed to do this, and finding the courage to do it anyway. I think, yeah, that's definitely something I try to put in the book for sure.
Yeah. And you even mentioned that it's a sense of people who are magicians are having too much magic in a world of magic. Whereas the
Hmm.
supernatural world and the Bureau and everything, they use all kinds of magical items and enchantments. However, there is that
Hmm.
stigma against someone who has that strong connection. And
Hmm.
this is, I am absolutely not the person to be making this kind of connection. So I would like to hear your takeaway from that. I kind of felt that, and this may be getting really deep for something that is again a book targeting for younger audiences. I felt that kind of reflected the way that the Western culture is built upon indigenous people and slave labor and all of this stuff, and then when it comes to people who are of these cultural backgrounds celebrating their own heritage, it's kind of quieted down by society as a whole. Am I touching on anything that was intentionally put in there at all?
Well, I'm not sure that was intentional, but I mean that's a great point that I didn't think about. I didn't think about myself. I mean, there's certainly a connection that can be made. Because you're right, there is a element of conforming and if you're being more like maybe like if you're Mexican, you can't speak your own language, you have to speak English, that kind of thing. So I think there is an element of taking what's powerful, what you consider powerful about yourself, and kind of like lessening that to fit in more. I guess that's a great connection. I didn't make myself. Absolutely.
And it also kind of comes from the fact that the Bureau as a whole is kind of benefiting from that background at the same time uh, oppressing those people. That's kind of where I was coming from when I made that connection from from the first book. So that was kind of the story of the first one, and it moves into the second one. And so let's talk a little bit about the book that's out today. That's the third book of the trilogy. Is this going to be the final one?
Well, it's actually we actually signed for two more books, so this would be book three or five. Yeah.
Oh, very nice. And so there are more to come, and there are further
Mhm.
plans. There is, I believe, a movie in the works, isn't there?
Yeah, absolutely. So we have we're with Universal Pictures has the rights right now, and we've come really close to having a movie get made. And we had some delays, but this is gonna be a big year for us. We have a lot of talented people working behind the scenes, and so I'm hoping in the near future we have something really concrete to announce, and that'd be really exciting.
And so when it comes to publishing a book that is having these conversations of adapting it, is there any pressure from whenever you're pitching these ideas that they want to know where the story is going?
Oh yeah, absolutely. They definitely want to know, like, 'cause so when we first pitched the first book, they wanted to know what two and three, because it started as a trilogy before we expanded it, and they definitely wanted to know where book two and three were going to go. And so now that we're up to 5 books, they want to know like where we're going to be with 5 books. And so because you have to kind of plan out and lay the groundwork for those later books in case the movie is a hit.
And so, like you said, they kind of wanted to know where it was going to go. If I believe I tried to do my research for these. Amari and the Night Brothers was your first published book, correct?
It was, yeah, absolutely.
What was your writing experience prior to that?
Oh man, a lot of no's and a lot of rejections, years and years. So I started writing when I was like 8th grade, maybe. I used to write these like horror stories for my classmates, where we had a field trip gone terribly wrong, and our classmates would kind of gather around to see who survives in the end and what happened. And that's kind of where I first learned that something I wrote could be entertaining for other people. And so mostly it was just a hobby. It was a hobby at that point. And eventually I kind of worked my way up to writing full books. And I thought, well, maybe I'll give it a try and see if I can do this professionally. And that was like years and years of no. Like, I think if you any creative outlet, if you do any kind of creative outlet, you know that a lot of people want to do the same thing as you, and it's hard to break through and make it an actual job. And so I had pretty much given up. And one day I'm getting ready to go to school, and I'm doing my paperwork, and there's a pitch contest for story ideas, and I put mine in, and Mark pretty much got discovered right there, and that's kind of where the track we've been on since then.
And for that contest, was that Amari that was the pitch?
Yeah, it was Amari. Yeah, it was for the first book. Yeah.
Okay, so you really pushed, you persevered, and then that opportunity came up, and it was what helped you push through to getting it published, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I have been trying for years to get it published, and I just wasn't having any luck. And then, one day you put a tweet out, and the right person says yes, and everything happened from there.
Yeah,
Yep.
you really do have to grind away until you just get that one break. Were
Absolutely.
there were there
Absolutely.
any were there any manuscripts or stories that you had been pitching previously that just kind of fizzled away before Amari got picked up?
No, Amari was really the first book I tried to pitch. I wrote some books before that, but I didn't think they were good enough to send off, so I didn't send them off. And then Amari was the first thing I felt great about when I finished. Like, man, this might really be something. And so that was when I first really tried. But it was years of no's before it was ever a yes.
Are there any stories or plans of future series or standalone novels you want to pitch to publishers?
Well, right now we're working on Amari graphic novels in the same world, but not actually Amari. Maybe her brother Quentin. Kind of see his story through graphic novel format. I think that'd be a great way to get readers who kind of reluctant readers who kind of gravitate to the graphic novels instead of the full novels. I think that's a great way to introduce them to the world and get them involved with the series. And so that's what we're doing right now.
So when you started pitching this as a series, did you have it plotted out for 5 books initially, or did you have it plotted out for 3? How far ahead did you outline the story?
So I had the first book done, but I had kind of like a vague outline for the next 2 books. And because it did start off as a trilogy, so I kind of had like a vague outline for the next 2 books. And then when the first book did well and the second book did well, and then we actually got a chance to do 2 more books. I had to plot out for those 2 as well, and kind of change the outline for book 3 to kind of fit to kind of a bigger story arc. So that's kind of how that worked. Yeah.
So was there initially a point where the third book was going to be the final entry before it got
Yeah.
renewed?
Yeah. Absolutely. Book 3 started off being being the final book. Yeah, as a trilogy. Yeah.
And was that kind of a relief to be told that there was a demand for more books and that the publisher wanted to keep it going?
Yeah, definitely. Because with writers, probably any creative idea, you just never know if you're going to get another opportunity to write a book, right? Because every contract, you just don't know if that's your last contract, right? And so to be able to see the reception be so great, and book 1 hit the bestseller list, and then book 2 hit #1 on the bestseller list, and so to have the opportunity to write more books, man, that was really gratifying. It's more than I ever could dream for the series. So I'm really excited.
And is there any kind of pressure where it feels like you initially had it outlined for a trilogy, and now there's 2 more books on the way, and now there's graphic novels? Are you just kind of having to just keep tapping that well? Is there any worry of it running dry anytime soon?
I mean, I think there's always a small worry that, like, man, I hope the next book lives up to these books, because you get reader expectations, and you get publisher expectations that for it to do as well as the other books, and you get you constantly get like letters and emails and messages from readers to say, I want this to happen in the next book, I want that to happen in the next book, and so there's always kind of like pressures. But I think the most you can really do is just write the best book you can, and kind of everything else is kind of out of your control, and so that's what I've tried to do.
And when it comes to reader expectations, how has it felt getting that feedback on something that took so long for you to bring out in the first place, something that you were told no so many times before? How does it feel getting that feedback from readers?
Oh, it feels great, man. Because when you're writing, it's always a small part of like, man, if I can just break through, I know readers will love it, and to have that kind of like turn out to be kind of true. I mean, that feels like you're on top of the world. And so, having people reach out and tell me what the book meant to them, and people who maybe they've been bullied or something, and maybe help them through that moment. I think that's the best feeling in the world.
When it comes to writing from such a young age, starting in 8th grade, do you have any advice to any potential young writers out there?
I would say read broadly, like just read everything you get your hands on, because that way you can kind of build your story skills. And then what I mean by that is, like, find out the things that you like about a story, like what makes the story enjoyable to you, like what was it the writer did that made you say, made you gasp or made you laugh, and kind of try to emulate that in your own writing. And also the things you don't like, the things that you read, like, I just didn't like the way that played out, and that teaches you some lessons too. So I would say definitely read broadly and read everything you can get your hands on, I would say.
And when you were initially writing Amari, what were some of the inspirations that you drew from early on in the process?
Probably the biggest inspiration is just my own childhood. Like I said, a lot of Amari's insecurities and things were kind of my own insecurities. Just kind of feeling like I didn't have as much as some of my peers had, and kind of learning to find my own voice and my own self confidence. And so a lot of her struggles are just the same things that I struggled with at that same age.
And if there are any young readers who do have that, have a connection to that, who may be finding themselves in a position where they themselves feel like an outsider, do you have anything to say, to address to them that they may be able to get out of a story like Amari?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing about Amari finding her confidence is learning to accept herself, and find it, and to realize that the things that make her unique, that maybe she get picked at for, or maybe that they make her stand out or feel other or separated, are also the things that make you special, and the things that make you you. And I think you see Amari kind of embrace that over the course of the story, and you see how much confidence that gives her. And I would say the same thing to a kid, is just kind of embrace the things that make you different and make you unique.
And one last question. I like to ask this to every writer that comes on, so please take as much time as you'd like to answer it, and answer it in any way you see appropriate. BB, how do you see yourself as a writer, and the work that you do as a writer?
Oh man, I think the simplest way is I try to write stories that people want to read. I mean, if I could do it simply, but more than that, I try to include messages that I think kids will benefit from, messages of encouragement, of like acceptance, not only of yourself, but of people around you. Like, it's so easy to we're so divided today as far as a nation, just whether that's your class or your beliefs or how you look or or how you feel or whatever. And so I think the story of empathy, of connecting, I think seeing how Amari is the victim of that in some ways, and then sometimes you get to see the characters who did do bad things or did kind of judge people prematurely. You get to see how they kind of learn from their mistakes and become a better person. And I think just try to strike stories that kids can benefit from and enjoy what they do.
And that has been an interview with B.B. Alston. The third book in the Supernatural Investigations series, Amari and the Despicable Wonders, is out now. This is also going to bring us to the end of another episode of the Book Fair Children's Literature for Grown-Ups. Please remember to share the podcast, rate, review. You can follow us on social media. Any links to resources, including recent releases, will all be in the podcast description. And as always, I'll talk at you next time.